Over the past 3 decades, dozens of NFL players, Pro Bowlers, Super Bowl champions, rookies who never got the chance to play a single down, have found their careers and sometimes their lives cut short not by a blitz or a blown-out knee, but by gunfire. Some survived, some didn't. These are the stories that rarely make the highlight reels. The stories that change players, families, and the league forever. This is the other side of the NFL. Steve Foley. Steve Foley was a standout linebacker in the NFL, born in 1975 and drafted in 1998 by the Cincinnati Bengals. After stints with the Bengals and the Houston Texans, he signed with the San Diego Chargers in 2004 and quickly became a defensive cornerstone. By 2006, at 30 years old, he was one of the Chargers' most reliable playmakers, a physical, instinctive defender feared for his ability to pressure quarterbacks and control the field. But in the early hours of September 3, 2006, Foley's career came to a sudden end. Driving near his home in Poway, California, he was followed by off-duty Coronado police officer Aaron Mansour, who suspected him of drunk driving. The pursuit ended in a confrontation outside Foley's house. When Foley stepped out of his vehicle, the situation escalated in seconds. Mansour opened fire, striking Foley in the hand, thigh, and hip. The injuries were severe enough to end his season before it began, and he never played another down in the NFL. The aftermath was messy and contested. Foley was charged with a misdemeanor DUI and placed on probation, while his passenger faced separate assault and DUI charges. Mansour, for his part, was cleared of criminal wrongdoing after investigators ruled the shooting an act of self-defense, a conclusion that Foley and his attorneys never accepted. Years later, Foley pursued a civil suit against the city of Coronado and reached a multi-million-dollar settlement. For fans and teammates, it remained a jarring loss. One of the Chargers' key defenders taken out not by an opposing tackle, but by gunfire outside his own front door. It stands as one of the more unsettling collisions between law enforcement and professional sports in modern NFL history. Next, Keith Davis. On July 16, 2006, Dallas Cowboys defensive back Keith Davis was driving along a Dallas interstate when his car was suddenly sprayed with gunfire. 2 bullets struck him, one in the head, another in the right thigh. Somehow, bleeding and in shock, he managed to keep control of the vehicle and drive himself to Baylor University Medical Center. Doctors stabilized him quickly, and he was released the very next day. Police floated theories ranging from a botched carjacking to simple road rage, but nothing was ever confirmed. It wasn't Davis's first brush with gun violence. 3 years earlier, in 2003, he had already been wounded in the hip and elbow in a separate shooting. Each time, he came back. Originally signing with the Cowboys as an undrafted free agent out of Sam Houston State in 2002, Davis had clawed his way onto the roster through sheer physicality on special teams, eventually working into a starting safety role by 2005, one of the defense's toughest, most respected competitors. The 2006 shooting could easily have ended his career, or worse. Instead, after surgery to remove bullet fragments, Davis reported back to the team and didn't miss a single game that fall, suiting up for all 16 contests and continuing to anchor Dallas's special teams. The investigation never produced a clean resolution. Police pursued leads involving a white pickup truck spotted near the scene, but no suspect was ever charged, and Davis himself gave shifting accounts of where he'd been that night, leaving lingering questions that were never fully answered. What was never in question was his resilience. A near-fatal night on a Dallas highway became just another chapter in a career defined by toughness. Next, Jerome McDougle. On the night of July 28, 2005, in Miami, Philadelphia Eagles defensive end Jerome McDougle had a terrifying brush with death. A former first-round pick who built his reputation at the University of Miami, starring on the Hurricanes' 2001 national championship team, before going 15th overall in the 2003 NFL Draft. McDougle was expected to take on a bigger role for an Eagles team fresh off a Super Bowl appearance. Instead, just before training camp, his career and his life were thrown into chaos. Sitting in his car outside his Miami home, McDougle was confronted by 3 armed men demanding his valuables, including a luxury watch. In the ensuing struggle, shots were fired. McDougle was hit in the abdomen while 2 more bullets tore into his car door. He was rushed to Jackson Memorial Hospital's Ryder Trauma Center, where doctors worked to stabilize him. He survived and eventually was able to walk and speak with investigators, but the injury cost him the entire 2005 season. The investigation moved fast. 4 teenagers, ranging from 15 to 19 years old, were arrested and charged with robbery and attempted felony murder. Authorities determined McDougle hadn't been targeted. It was a violent robbery attempt, and he'd simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He returned to the field in 2006, determined to reclaim his role, though he never fully reached the ceiling once projected for him. His story remains a stark illustration of how quickly off-field violence can alter or end a promising career, and how far resilience can carry a player back from the edge. Next, Terrence Kiel. On July 4th, 2003, in Houston, Texas, just months after being drafted by the San Diego Chargers, rookie defensive back Terrence Kiel found himself fighting for his life. Outside a Houston mall, during what police described as an attempted carjacking, Kiel was shot 3 times. Once in the ankle, once in the knee, once in the abdomen. Kiel had arrived in the league with real expectations. A standout safety at Texas A&M, he'd been taken in the 2nd round to bolster San Diego's secondary, prized for his speed and physical style of play. He was expected to make an immediate impact. Instead, before he'd played a single down, his career nearly ended before it started. Doctors confirmed none of his wounds were life-threatening, and after weeks of recovery, Kiel proved his toughness by defying the odds, returning to the field and starting 7 games as a rookie. Investigators tied the shooting to the attempted carjacking, but no suspects were ever charged. What remained was the story of a young player whose NFL career began not with fanfare, but with survival, an early and sobering reminder of the dangers that can find NFL players even far from the field. Next, Joey Porter. On the night of August 31st, 2003, violence erupted in the parking lot outside the All Sports Bar and Grill in Denver. Gunfire broke out, leaving 6 people wounded and 1 man dead. Caught in the chaos was Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker Joey Porter, struck by a bullet in his left buttock. Porter was already a cornerstone of the Steelers' defense. Drafted in the 3rd round in 1999 out of Colorado State, he'd built a reputation as one of the league's fiercest, most vocal pass rushers, and by 2003, he was a Pro Bowler known for intensity and leadership. The shooting could have derailed his season. Initially listed in serious condition, Porter recovered remarkably fast, missing only 2 games and finishing the year with 65 tackles and 5 sacks across 14 contests. Investigators concluded Porter hadn't been targeted at all. The shooting stemmed from gang-related tensions inside the bar, and Porter was an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire. The man killed in the shooting reportedly had a history of gang activity, and authorities eventually identified the gunman. For Porter, the incident became just one more data point in a career built on toughness. He went on to win a Super Bowl with the Steelers, earned multiple Pro Bowl selections, and cemented his legacy as one of the most feared linebackers of his era. Next, Darrent Williams. On January 1st, 2007, tragedy struck the NFL when Denver Broncos cornerback Darrent Williams was shot and killed in a drive-by shooting in downtown Denver, hours into the new year. He was only 24 years old. Williams had been drafted in the 2nd round of the 2005 NFL Draft out of Oklahoma State and quickly established himself as a starter, known for blazing speed and big play ability on defense and special teams. His future looked bright. That night, after leaving a nightclub with teammates and friends, Williams climbed into a rented limousine. Moments later, another vehicle pulled alongside and opened fire, spraying the limo with bullets. Williams was struck in the neck and died before reaching the hospital. The shooting stunned the Broncos organization and the wider NFL. Investigators eventually connected it to a dispute that had started inside the nightclub earlier that night. In 2010, Willie D. Clark, a known gang member, was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole, plus more than 1,000 additional years on related charges. Williams's death left a permanent void in Denver and remains one of the league's most painful losses of a player in the prime of his career. Next, Shane Curry. On the night of May 3rd, 1992, tragedy struck in Cincinnati. Shane Curry, a 23-year-old defensive end for the Indianapolis Colts, was shot in the head outside the Armadillo nightclub after a dispute over a blocked car. Just 1 year into his NFL career, his life and his promising future were cut short in an instant. Curry's path to the league had been marked by talent and determination. A Cincinnati native, he began his college career at Georgia Tech before transferring to the University of Miami, where he became a standout on the defensive line. His combination of strength and speed made him a legitimate NFL prospect, and the Colts selected him in the second round of the 1991 draft. As a rookie, he flashed the potential many believed would fuel a long, impactful career. Then, in the early hours of that May morning, it all ended. After leaving the club, Curry encountered a car blocking traffic. Words were exchanged, tensions rose, and a 15-year-old named Artis Anderson pulled a gun and fired a single shot that struck Curry in the head. He was rushed to the hospital but could not be saved. Anderson was tried as an adult, convicted of murder, and sentenced to 15 years to life, plus 3 additional years for a weapons charge. For the Colts, and for Curry's hometown, his death remains a sobering reminder of how a single moment of violence can erase not just a career, but a life full of promise. Next, Fred Lane. On July 6, 2000, in Charlotte, North Carolina, the NFL lost one of its rising stars when Carolina Panthers running back Fred Lane was shot and killed inside his own home. He was just 24 years old. Lane's path to the league was built on resilience. Undrafted out of tiny Lane College in 1997, he forced his way onto Carolina's roster through sheer determination. As a rookie, he led the team in rushing, broke multiple franchise records, and stunned Atlanta with a 147-yard performance that announced his arrival. Over 3 seasons, he piled up more than 2,000 rushing yards, becoming one of the Panthers' most reliable backs. But on that July night, as Lane walked through his own front door, his wife, Deidre, shot him, once in the chest, once in the back of the head. The crime stunned teammates and fans, and forced the football world to confront a brutal reality behind the headlines. Investigators uncovered a marriage plagued by conflict. Prosecutors portrayed Deidre as calculating, pointing to potential financial motives tied to a life insurance policy. She initially faced a murder charge, but in 2003, accepted a plea deal to voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to nearly 8 years in prison, with credit for time served. Next, Richard Collier. On September 2, 2008, in Jacksonville, Florida, Jaguars offensive tackle Richard Collier was sitting in a Cadillac Escalade outside an apartment complex after a night out with a teammate when a gunman opened fire without warning, hitting Collier 14 times. The attack left him paralyzed from the waist down, and complications later forced doctors to amputate his left leg. Collier's road to the NFL had never been easy. A standout at Valdosta State, he went undrafted in 2006 before signing with Jacksonville and earning a roster spot through persistence, becoming known as a steady, hard-working presence on the offensive line. By 2008, his career was still young, but full of promise that vanished in seconds that September night. Investigators soon determined the shooting wasn't random. The gunman, Tyrone Hartsfield, had clashed with Collier at a nightclub months earlier, and prosecutors argue the attack was an act of revenge. In 2009, Hartsfield was convicted of attempted first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, though the sentence was later reduced to 27 years. For Collier, survival became his defining achievement. From a hospital bed to life in a wheelchair, he built a second career as a motivational speaker, turning his story of resilience into a message for others. Next, Plaxico Burress. On November 28, 2008, in Manhattan, inside the Latin Quarter nightclub, the career of Giants wide receiver Plaxico Burress took a dramatic turn. Just months earlier, he'd been celebrated as a Super Bowl hero. The man who caught the game-winning touchdown in Super Bowl 42 to upset the previously undefeated New England Patriots. Burress had built his career on big plays. Drafted 8th overall by the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2000, he developed into a dominant, deep threat, but it was with the Giants that he reached his peak. Then came the night in Manhattan. Burress entered the club carrying an unlicensed handgun tucked into his waistband. When the weapon slipped, he grabbed for it, and it discharged, sending a bullet into his own right thigh. The wound itself wasn't life-threatening, but the damage to his career was immediate. The Giants suspended him for the rest of the season, and he turned himself into police days later. New York's strict gun laws left little room for leniency. Burress faced criminal possession charges and, in 2009, accepted a plea deal, 2 years in prison with 2 years of supervised release. He served nearly 20 months before being released in 2011. The Giants had already cut ties, and though he briefly resurfaced with the Jets, he never regained his former form. One accidental gunshot in a nightclub bathroom ended the prime of a career that had once stood at the very top of the football world. Next, Stedman Bailey. On the night of November 24th, 2015, Stedman Bailey, a wide receiver for the St. Louis Rams, was sitting in a car outside a home in Miami Gardens, Florida, when gunfire suddenly erupted. More than 30 rounds sprayed into the vehicle. Bailey was struck twice in the head. His cousin, Antoine Reeves, was hit multiple times while shielding 2 young children in the back seat. Remarkably, everyone in the car survived, though Bailey's injuries were life-threatening. Bailey's rise had been built on real talent. A standout at West Virginia University, he set school records with more than 3,000 receiving yards and 41 touchdowns, and the Rams drafted him in the 3rd round in 2013. He quickly became a reliable target, hauling in nearly 60 catches and showing flashes of a long-term future as a playmaker. The shooting changed everything. Surgeons removed bullet fragments and placed a metal plate in his skull. Bailey fought through a grueling recovery and even attempted an NFL comeback, but the violence had effectively ended his playing career. The investigation brought little closure. No arrests, no named suspects, no confirmed motive. Bailey found a new purpose instead, moving into coaching and mentoring and becoming a vocal advocate against gun violence, describing himself as a walking miracle. Next, Steve McNair. On July 4th, 2009, downtown Nashville became the scene of a shocking tragedy. Former NFL quarterback Steve McNair, only 2 years into retirement, was found dead inside a condominium, shot multiple times, twice in the chest, twice in the head. Beside him lay his 20-year-old girlfriend, Sahel Jenny Kazemi, killed by a single gunshot wound to the head. Police ultimately ruled it a murder-suicide. McNair's career had made him one of the most respected quarterbacks of his generation. Drafted 3rd overall in 1995 by the Houston Oilers, he guided the franchise through its relocation to Tennessee, where he became the face of the Titans, Air McNair. In 2000, he led Tennessee to Super Bowl 34, falling a single yard short of victory in one of the most dramatic finishes in league history. By 2003, he was named NFL co-MVP, cementing his legacy before finishing his career with the Baltimore Ravens and retiring in 2008. Off the field, though, his life had grown far more complicated. Investigators found that Kazemi, who was struggling financially and reportedly growing jealous over the relationship, had recently purchased the handgun used in the killing. Gunpowder residue was found on her hand, and the weapon was discovered beneath her body. Authorities concluded she shot McNair before turning the gun on herself. The football world mourned a man remembered for his toughness and leadership. His former teammates wore his number 9 throughout that season. Even as lingering questions remained about the private struggles behind a public image of invincibility. Next, Sean Taylor. On November 26, 2007, in Palmetto Bay, Florida, Washington Redskins safety Sean Taylor was at home with his girlfriend and young daughter when intruders broke in. Confronting them, Taylor was shot in the upper leg, the bullet severing his femoral artery. He was rushed to Jackson Memorial Hospital, but by the following day, the NFL had lost one of its brightest young stars. Taylor was just 24 years old. Drafted 5th overall in 2004, Taylor had quickly become one of the league's most feared defenders, a hard-hitting safety with rare instincts who earned a Pro Bowl selection in 2006 and was on track to become one of the greatest at his position. His physical, electrifying style terrified opponents and thrilled fans. The shooting sent shockwaves through the league, but investigators moved fast. Within days, four suspects from Fort Myers, Florida, were arrested, later joined by a fifth. Prosecutors charged them with murder and armed burglary. Eric Rivera Jr., just 17 at the time, was identified as the gunman. After years of court delays, he was convicted of second-degree murder in 2014 and sentenced to 57.5 years. His accomplices also received lengthy sentences. Taylor's death remains one of the most devastating losses in NFL history. A generational talent gone far too soon, leaving behind the haunting question of what might have been. Next, Chris Johnson. On March 8, 2015, in Orlando, Florida, former NFL running back Chris Johnson, known widely as CJ2K, was stopped at a red light when gunfire tore through his Jeep in a drive-by shooting. Johnson was hit in the shoulder. The driver, his friend Deirdre Dre Johnson, was killed instantly, and another passenger was injured. Johnson's rise to stardom began when the Tennessee Titans drafted him in the first round in 2008. He was named Rookie of the Year that season, and in 2009 he rushed for over 2,000 yards, a feat placing him among the elite backs in NFL history. His blazing 4.24-second 40-yard dash at the Combine had earned him his nickname. After 6 seasons in Tennessee, he'd signed with the New York Jets in 2014, hoping for a resurgence. Johnson survived the shooting and was released from the hospital in stable condition, but the tragedy left a lasting scar. He later signed with the Arizona Cardinals, showing flashes of his old explosiveness but never fully regaining his former dominance. The case was investigated as a homicide, but no arrests were ever made. Authorities described it as a targeted drive-by, though Johnson himself denied being the intended target, leaving the case and the questions around it permanently unresolved. Next, Aldon Smith. On June 29, 2012, deep in the hills of San Jose, California, a house party hosted by San Francisco 49ers linebacker Aldon Smith spiraled into violence when uninvited guests arrived. Shots were fired, 2 people were wounded, and Smith himself was stabbed in the chaos. At the time, Smith was one of the NFL's most promising young stars. Drafted 7th overall in 2011, he burst onto the scene with 14 sacks as a rookie and followed it with an All-Pro season in 2012, establishing himself as one of the league's most dangerous pass rushers. But that summer night began to tarnish his rise. Investigators said Smith fired a handgun from his balcony, trying to break up the confrontation. When deputies searched his home afterward, they found multiple assault-style rifles illegal under California law, leading to 3 felony weapons charges filed in October 2013. Smith initially pleaded not guilty, then changed his plea to no contest in May 2014. A judge reduced the charges to misdemeanors, sentencing him to 12 days in county jail, 3 years of probation, a $2,000 fine, and more than 200 hours of community service, on top of a civil lawsuit from a wounded guest. The incident marked the start of a troubling off-field pattern that would eventually overshadow his talent altogether, turning what could have been a Hall of Fame career into a cautionary tale about how quickly promise can unravel. Next, Aqib Talib. In the early hours of June 5, 2016, news broke out of Dallas that Denver Broncos cornerback Aqib Talib had been shot. Fresh off a Super Bowl 50 victory, Talib, one of the league's most feared defensive backs, was suddenly lying in a hospital bed with a bullet wound in his right leg. Talib's career had always been as turbulent as it was brilliant. Drafted in the first round by Tampa Bay in 2008, he built a reputation as a lockdown corner with a fiery edge, later joining New England before becoming a centerpiece of Denver's no-fly zone secondary in 2014. His aggressive style earned multiple Pro Bowl selections and a championship ring. Controversy, though, had shadowed him for years, including a 2011 aggravated assault charge in Texas, later dropped for lack of evidence. Initial reports on the 2016 shooting suggested he'd been caught in a nightclub incident, but as Dallas police investigated, the story shifted. Medical reports showed the bullet entered the back of his thigh and exited through his calf, and Talib himself later admitted he had accidentally shot himself, though he claimed he'd been too intoxicated to remember the details clearly. The injury forced him to miss the Broncos' White House visit celebrating their Super Bowl win and sidelined him for part of training camp. He returned that season to help anchor Denver's defense and earned another Pro Bowl nod. Police ultimately declined to press charges, closing the case. Next, Jovan Belcher. On the morning of December 1st, 2012, in Kansas City, Missouri, tragedy struck the NFL when linebacker Jovan Belcher, just 25 years old, fatally shot his girlfriend Cassandra Perkins before driving to the Chiefs practice facility and taking his own life. Belcher's path to the league had been unlikely. Coming out of the University of Maine, he went undrafted in 2009, but his determination earned him a roster spot with Kansas City. By 2010, he'd worked his way into the starting lineup, and in 2011 he delivered his best season, 61 tackles and a reputation as a tough, reliable defender. Away from the field, though, personal turmoil had been building. In the early hours of that December morning, Belcher and Perkins, parents of a 3-month-old daughter, argued at their home. Just before 8 a.m., Belcher shot Perkins multiple times while his mother, who was staying with them, tried to intervene. Perkins was rushed to the hospital but could not be saved. Belcher then drove to Arrowhead Stadium, where he encountered Chiefs officials, including General Manager Scott Pioli and head coach Romeo Crennel. Witnesses said he thanked them for their support, asked them to take care of his daughter, then walked a few steps away and shot himself. An autopsy revealed his blood alcohol content was more than twice the legal limit, and that Perkins had been shot 9 times. Years later, doctors examining Belcher's brain found signs consistent with CTE. The tragedy shocked the league and sparked urgent, ongoing conversations about mental health, domestic violence, and the hidden costs of the sport. Next, Will Smith. On April 9, 2016, in New Orleans, former Saints defensive end Will Smith, a hero in the city's football history, was shot and killed following a late-night traffic altercation in the Lower Garden District. He was just 34 years old, and the loss rippled across the NFL and the community he had once carried to glory. Smith's career had been defined by loyalty and dominance. Drafted in the first round by the Saints in 2004, he played his entire 9-year career in New Orleans, earning a Pro Bowl selection in 2006 and becoming a cornerstone of the defense that delivered the city its first Super Bowl title in 2009. To fans, he was more than a player. He was part of the Saints' identity. That April night, a minor traffic collision escalated into a heated confrontation, and local businessman Cardell Hayes opened fire. Smith was struck multiple times and died at the scene. His wife, Raquel, was also shot but survived. The courtroom battle stretched on for years. Hayes was first convicted of manslaughter in 2016, but the verdict was later overturned after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down non-unanimous jury decisions in Louisiana. A 2024 retrial found him guilty of manslaughter again, though he was acquitted of attempted manslaughter for the shooting of Raquel. He was sentenced that April to 25 years, with later adjustments granting credit for time served under home incarceration. Smith's legacy in New Orleans endures as a champion and a leader, even as his death remains one of the NFL's darkest off-field tragedies. Next, Joe McKnight. On December 1st, 2016, in Terrytown, Louisiana, former NFL running back Joe McKnight was shot and killed during a road rage encounter that stunned the football world. He was only 28 years old. McKnight's career had begun with extraordinary promise. A star at USC, he was drafted in the 4th round in 2010 by the New York Jets, known for explosive speed and versatility, and led the league in kickoff return average in 2011. After 3 seasons with the Jets, a brief stint with Kansas City, and time in the Canadian Football League, he was still fighting to revive his career when a traffic dispute turned deadly. At an intersection, McKnight and 54-year-old Ronald Gasser exchanged words. Witnesses said McKnight never left his vehicle before Gasser pulled a gun and fired 3 shots, killing him on the spot. The legal case dragged on for years. Gasser was convicted of manslaughter in 2018 by a 10-2 jury and sentenced to 30 years. But after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down non-unanimous jury verdicts in 2020, the conviction was overturned. Louisiana Supreme Court later ruled he couldn't be retried for murder, and Gasser eventually pleaded guilty to manslaughter, receiving a 10-year sentence. He was released in 2024 after serving less than 8 years, an outcome that left many feeling justice remained unfinished. McKnight's legacy is that of a gifted athlete whose life and career were cut short not on the field, but at a roadside in Louisiana. Next, Phillip Adams. On April 7, 2021, in Rock Hill, South Carolina, a quiet neighborhood became the scene of one of the most shocking tragedies to involve a former NFL player. Phillip Adams, once an NFL defensive back, opened fire at the home of Dr. Robert Leslie, killing 6 people. The doctor, his wife Barbara, their 2 young grandchildren, and 2 repairmen working outside. Hours later, Adams was found dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Adams's football journey had begun with real promise. Born and raised in Rock Hill, he started South Carolina State before the San Francisco 49ers drafted him in the 7th round in 2010. Over the next 6 years, he played for 6 different teams: the 49ers, Patriots, Seahawks, Raiders, Jets, and Falcons, filling roles as a defensive back and special teams player. His career, though, was marred by injuries, including multiple documented concussions that would later cast a long shadow over his life. The shooting stunned the community and the nation. Friends and neighbors struggled to explain how a quiet, locally known former athlete could commit such devastation. Investigators found no clear motive at the time, but the tragedy reignited urgent conversations about football, brain trauma, and mental health. Months later, an autopsy revealed Adams had severe stage 2 CTE, with doctors noting extensive damage to his frontal lobes, the region often linked to impulsivity, aggression, and cognitive decline. The discovery placed his case among a growing and troubling list of former NFL players whose lives ended in violence connected to the disease. Next, Reche Caldwell. On June 6, 2020, in Tampa, Florida, former NFL wide receiver Reche Caldwell was preparing for a night out when his life came to a sudden, violent end. At 41 years old, he was ambushed outside his home and shot multiple times in what police described as a targeted robbery. He was rushed to the hospital, but did not survive. Caldwell's football journey began at the University of Florida, where he became one of the Gators' top receivers under Steve Spurrier. His college success carried him into the 2002 NFL Draft, where the San Diego Chargers took him in the 2nd round. Over 6 seasons he played for the Chargers, the New England Patriots, and the Washington Redskins. His most memorable year came in New England in 2006, when he led the team in receptions and receiving yards, helping Tom Brady and the Patriots reach the AFC Championship game. Life after football proved far more turbulent. Caldwell faced legal trouble, including a 2014 federal prison sentence for drug distribution, and in 2020 pleaded guilty to healthcare fraud. He was scheduled to be sentenced just days after his death. Those close to him said he'd been working to turn his life around. On the night he died, stepping outside to grab a jacket before a date, he was ambushed by assailants who'd been lying in wait. His girlfriend later said the attackers opened fire without warning, and his mother said she believed he'd been set up. Teammates remembered Caldwell not for his struggles, but for his humor, his energy, and his ever-present smile. Next, Cory Ballentine. On April 27, 2019, in Topeka, Kansas, just hours after living out his NFL dream, Cory Ballentine's life changed forever. Drafted in the 6th round by the New York Giants, the Washburn University product had overcome the odds, rising from Division II football to the national stage, and celebrated that night with friends and teammates. By dawn, the celebration had turned into a nightmare. Around 1 a.m., Ballentine and teammate Dwayne Simmons were outside a party when a car approached and words were exchanged. The vehicle drove off, then suddenly circled back, and gunfire erupted without warning. Simmons, just 23 years old, was killed instantly. Ballentine was struck in the hip as he tried to flee, collapsing on the pavement. The city that had cheered their triumph hours earlier woke to shock and grief. Investigators tied the shooting to Francisco "Frankie" Mendez, who'd been involved in a string of violent robberies that same night. In 2022, a Kansas jury convicted him of first-degree murder, multiple counts of attempted murder, and aggravated robbery. Testimony showed he had paused, turned the car around, and waited up to 15 seconds before firing, enough for prosecutors to argue premeditation. In November 2024, the Kansas Supreme Court upheld nearly all of the convictions, including the murder of Simmons and the attempted murder of Ballentine, though some lesser robbery counts were overturned. Ballentine recovered, went on to play in the NFL, and continued his career, but the night meant to mark his rise will always be remembered instead for its devastating cost. The life of his best friend, taken just as both of their futures were beginning. Next, Hernandez. On June 17, 2013, in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, a body was discovered in an industrial park less than a mile from the home of New England Patriots tight end Aaron Hernandez. The victim was 27-year-old Odin Lloyd, a semi-professional football player and acquaintance of Hernandez's. What began as a routine homicide investigation soon exposed one of the NFL's brightest young stars as its central suspect. Hernandez had risen fast. Drafted in the 4th round in 2010 out of Florida, he became a key piece of New England's offense, teaming with Rob Gronkowski to help redefine the modern tight end position. His talent earned him a 5-year, $40 million contract extension in 2012, seemingly securing a long future in New England. Behind the success, though, darker trouble was building. Investigators tied Hernandez to Lloyd's murder through surveillance footage, cell phone records, and a rental car registered in his name found at the crime scene. He was arrested on June 26, 2013, and released by the Patriots within 90 minutes. The trial captivated the nation. In April 2015, Hernandez was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. 2 years later, in April 2017, he was found dead in his prison cell in an apparent suicide. Massachusetts law briefly vacated his conviction as a result, but the state's highest court reinstated it in 2019, closing one of the darkest chapters in NFL history. The story of an athlete who traded a $40 million contract and NFL stardom for a life sentence. His legacy defined not by touchdowns, but by violence. Next, Rae Carruth. Rae Carruth was once considered a rising star in the NFL. Drafted 27th overall in the first round of the 1997 draft, the wide receiver joined the Carolina Panthers after a standout career at Colorado, where he'd been named an All-American in 1996. His rookie season was promising enough to earn him a spot on the PFWA All-Rookie team. Just 2 years later, his career and his life spiraled into infamy. On November 16, 1999, in Charlotte, North Carolina, Carruth's girlfriend, Reche Adams, 8 months pregnant with his child, was ambushed while driving behind his vehicle. Another car pulled alongside hers, and she was shot 4 times. Gravely wounded, Adams managed to call 911, telling police that Carruth had stopped his own car in front of hers, effectively boxing her in for the attack. She fell into a coma, but doctors performed an emergency C-section that saved her son, Chancellor Lee, who nonetheless suffered permanent brain damage and was later diagnosed with cerebral palsy. Adams never recovered. She died in December 1999. Investigators found that Carruth had conspired with 2 other men, Van Brett Watkins, the gunman, and Michael Kennedy, the driver, to carry out the attack. In 2001, Carruth was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, shooting into an occupied vehicle, and using an instrument to destroy an unborn child. He was acquitted of first-degree murder, but sentenced to nearly 19 years in prison. He was released on October 22, 2018. His son, Chancellor, continues to live with severe disabilities under the care of his grandmother, Sandra Adams. Carruth's name endures as a reminder of one of the darkest chapters in NFL history. Not a story of athletic triumph, but of a calculated crime that shocked the sports world. Next, Brian Robinson Jr. On August 28, 2022, in Washington, D.C., just weeks before his rookie season was set to begin, Brian Robinson Jr., a 23-year-old running back freshly drafted by the Washington Commanders, was ambushed in an attempted robbery and carjacking. He was shot twice, once in the glut and once in the knee, and rushed to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. For many players, an injury like that before a single regular season snap could mean the end before the beginning. Robinson had just completed a 5-year journey at Alabama, patiently waiting behind future NFL stars before finally seizing his opportunity as a senior. A breakout year capped by more than 1,300 rushing yards and a national championship appearance made him a third-round pick in 2022. Washington saw him as a foundational piece of their backfield. The shooting stunned the football world, but within days doctors confirmed there was no ligament or bone damage, and Robinson's determination became clear almost immediately. Just 6 weeks later, on October 9th, 2022, he ran onto the field for his NFL debut against the Tennessee Titans, carrying the ball 9 times to a standing ovation, a moment that was less about yards gained than about survival and resilience. Police later arrested 2 teenagers, ages 15 and 17, in connection with the robbery. Both were charged, and by the following year, each received multi-year sentences in juvenile custody. What could have been a tragic end instead became one of the most inspirational comebacks in recent NFL history. Next, Keon White. The list of NFL players caught in gun violence didn't stop in years past. It kept growing into 2026. In the early morning hours of February 9th, 2026, just hours after Super Bowl 60 wrapped up at Levi's Stadium, San Francisco 49ers defensive lineman Keon White was shot outside a nightclub on San Francisco's Mission Street. White had attended the Super Bowl itself, watching his former team, the New England Patriots, fall to the Seattle Seahawks. He'd been traded from New England to San Francisco earlier that season. Afterward, he was hosting a private party at a bar and nightclub called Dahlia's. According to witnesses and reporting that followed, a verbal altercation broke out, reportedly involving rapper Lil Baby, who was in town for a separate Super Bowl event nearby, and shots were fired by an unknown suspect. San Francisco police said White was not believed to have been part of the underlying dispute. He was simply caught in the gunfire. He was struck in the ankle and rushed to a hospital, where he underwent successful surgery that afternoon. The team confirmed his injuries were not considered career-threatening. White, a 2023 second-round pick of the Patriots who'd been dealt to the 49ers at the trade deadline, had appeared in 11 games for San Francisco that season. His shooting drew added attention as the second time in roughly 18 months that a 49ers player had been shot in the city. Wide receiver Ricky Pearsall had been shot in the chest during an attempted robbery in August 2024. As of the incident, San Francisco police said the investigation remained open, with no arrests made and the shooter still unidentified. Next, Ricky Thenarse. Not every player caught up in gun violence makes it to a regular season snap, but the danger doesn't discriminate by roster status. In April 2026, former NFL safety Ricky Thenarse was shot in South Los Angeles and rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery. Thenarse's path to professional football had been defined by promise that never quite arrived. A 4-star recruit out of Los Angeles, he starred at the University of Nebraska from 2006 to 2010, appearing in 51 games, winning special teams MVP honors in 2006 and 2007, and taking on a larger defensive role as an upperclassman. Injuries limited how far his college potential translated, and he went undrafted in 2011. He signed with the Seattle Seahawks as a free agent, played in 3 preseason games, and recorded a single tackle before being released in final roster cuts. His NFL career beginning and ending before a regular season game was ever played. 15 years later, Thenarse was shot in the stomach in South Los Angeles and rushed into emergency surgery. Reporting attributed the shooting to a personal dispute, a love triangle involving Thenarse, his ex-girlfriend, and the father of her child. Law enforcement sources said 2 people, a man and a woman, were seen fleeing the scene in a black SUV. As of the reporting, no arrests had been made. Thenarse was expected to make a full recovery. His story, a brief, ultimately unfulfilled NFL stint followed by a near-fatal shooting more than a decade later, underscores a theme running through nearly every case in this list. For NFL players past and present, the dangers of gun violence rarely end when the game does. Some of them walked away. Some never did. Their stories are still unfolding. If this moved you, hit subscribe because there are more stories like this you need to hear.